So welcome, Jon, and take us away.
All right. Welcome, everybody. And today we're going to talk. So generally, I try to make these the skills that we talk about, the approaches that they're applicable in your non-intimate relationships too. This is very much an intimate relationship skill. The only thing that you can pick up from your non-intimate relationships is to be able to tell the difference between the types of relationships and the level of communication that's needed. So today we're going to talk about why you should talk about everything in your intimate relationship. And this is also not a why at some point you should talk about everything. It's why I think it's a good idea right now to start talking about everything. So there are two arrangements that I see with couples. And it tends to be the first arrangement is what they like come into therapy with, and they think this is what good relationship is. This is the gold standard. And the second is what they learn is effective and what actually lets us have a good relationship. So I'll use two metaphors. The first arrangement that I see couples kind of fall into, I call it the neighbors on the same street arrangement. Our relationship consists of the street that we live on. We have our two separate houses, and our job is to not fill up one another's house with crap. What this leads to in a relationship is we get careful with each other, which isn't a bad thing. We do a lot of evaluating of, should I talk about this or not? Now, those of you who have done this, should I talk to you or not about this? My guess is that a large percentage of the time down the road, it comes back to bite you in the butt when you decide, no, I shouldn't talk to you about this. So in that coupleship arrangement, this really isn't a unified relationship. This really isn't a co-constructed collaborative thing. This is two individuals trying not to make each other mad, trying not to get in each other's way. There's not a lot of room for intimacy there. The most intimate you can get is like, at the beginning of the summer, we threw a big party to show off some changes we've made to our backyard. And, I cooked for 150 different people, and it was really fun. But it was not the sit down heart to heart. It was people came by and said, oh, this looks great, and thank you for putting this on. And that's as intimate as you're going to get if you have the two houses on the same street relationship, is you'll do surface together. Now, the second metaphor, this is what intimate relationships really are. And I know for some of you, this might sound dramatic, overly dramatic. I don't think it is. So real intimate relationships is you are 200 feet up on a cliff, and you're lead climbing, you're tandem climbing, which means there's nobody on the ground to anchor you. You're anchored to one another 200 feet up in the air, and you have a rope between the two of you. So communication about everything is a must. You have to talk about how you're feeling. You have to talk about how strong your grip is. You have to talk about how confident you are in your next move. You have to talk about how your partner's movement and your partner's grip strength and your partner's position affects you. Because if one of you falls, you both fall. Now, hopefully you have enough structure in place, and you actually have the rope between the two of you, that if one of you falls, neither of you crashes to the ground. Neither of you falls 20 stories and crashes into the ground. But in real intimate relationships, there is nobody that cares as much about the well-being of the two of you as you do. There is nobody holding the safety net. There is nobody who has lived with you day in and day out, who has watched you closely, who can be as invested as your intimate partner can be. So in that arrangement, in a relationship, it's not a matter of, do we want to talk? Do we want to upset each other? It's a matter of, if we don't, we may not be able to make it to the top here. If we don't, we may end up dragging some dead weight, or worst case scenario, we both may end up falling and crashing horribly and getting hurt. A lot of couples, they hesitate. They even find every arrangement they can not to talk about everything, because of how nerve-wracking it can be, because of how disappointing it can be. because of how hard it can be. What I find with couples, if they realize, if they really buy in, if they really understand how crucial their relationship is to their health and well-being, people in bonded relationships, secure functioning relationships, they don't even have to be intimate, but people with close, intimate relationships live longer, statistically speaking. Their health problems are different, often less severe. Literally, your life depends on the quality of your closest relationships. So if you have that in mind, if you recognize that as the truth, telling each other everything is not optional. It's not a matter of, well, I think you should know this. It's, if you don't know what's going on my end of the rope and I don't know what's going on your end of the rope, we can't make it. We don't go anywhere. We stay stuck. Now, of course, it's not as easy as just saying, oh yeah, we'll just tell each other everything. It'll be easy. You have to have some prerequisites. You have to have some agreements ahead of time. The first agreement is we have to agree, we have to make the case with each other why it's a good idea to have this level of communication, this level of detail, this level of depth. For those of you who have done a full disclosure, think in those terms. Now, when I say telling each other everything, of course, I don't mean that literally. I mean it as a goal. I mean it as a guidepost. Those of you who have done full disclosure, you know that on the receiving end, it may not be helpful for you to know every little detail. It might not be helpful for you to know everything. But in successful disclosures, the couple ahead of time will come together and they will determine what is it that we need to talk about, no matter how hard it is, no matter how it makes me feel about you, no matter how it makes me feel about the relationship. And they determine the arena they determine what full information is considered. It's the same thing in an intimate relationship. We do the work of determining what's good for us to know, what's useful, even if it's hard, even if we don't like to hear it. What do we need to know about each other? Then they stick to that agreement. So the first step in being able to talk about everything is making the case for why it's a good idea to have that level of openness. Now, the second step is twofold. Number one, look at yourself as the giver of information. The way that you give information, is it helpful? Think back to your school days. Hopefully you had a teacher that you just loved and was the most effective teacher in the world for you. Think about the qualities that they had when they delivered information, when they took you along for a journey. I think of one of my favorites. She was my 7th grade English teacher. Now, actually, I'm going to think about a different one. It was my junior year English teacher, Mrs. Brown. And what she gave me that was so effective is she helped literature come alive to me. So we were juniors in high school, and every class period, she would actually read to us. We read like 2 or 3 books throughout the year together as a class. It was like back to the elementary school days. She would even do voices and inflections. And when we were reading things, part of the literature class was to help us understand why these works were significant. So she would even stop, and if there weren't footnotes, she would explain to us historical context. And I remember her reading Huck Finn, and she did accents and voices, and it was like Jim Dale's performance of Harry Potter to me. It just made it come alive. So when I look at her as an information giver, when I look at her as a teacher, there were some things that she did really, really effectively. She knew her audience. She didn't just see us as these like fully fledged adults that were just there for information. She knew there was an entertainment factor. So when she talked to us, she made sure that she had our attention. When we were talking about really, really difficult things like reading Huck Finn, we talked about racism, we talked about slavery. And she made sure that she was to the point, that she was factual, and that she was fair. So when you look at how you give information to your partner in the realm of this, we should talk about everything. Is the information you give, is it useful? Do you give it in a way that's useful, or do you give it couched in criticism? Do you give it when your emotions are high and your partner can't tell if you're just mad or if you're mad at them? Do you stop to check and see if your audience is following you? Or do you just get tunnel vision in your, well, here's what I've got to say, and you word vomit instead of actually communicate? The second part of that is look at the receiver. If you believe that sharing everything is important, do you receive information in a way that encourages, that holds that up as the principle? If your partner is telling something difficult to you, do you become defensive and angry? Do you do everything in your power to make them stop? Or are you open about your feelings? Gosh, this is so hard for me to hear. Give me a minute. I need to take a breath. All right, continue. I know this is important. Let's talk about it. Do you use that information down the road to hurt your partner? Do you take things that are said in confidence and do you bring them up unfairly? As the receiver, do you take big information and pretend like it never happened? So doing the opposite of using it as a weapon and just ignoring it, never referencing it again. All of these things, whether as the giver or the receiver, this goes into, so you can say, yes, we believe it's important to share everything. And then you can get the giving and the receiving wrong, and you can indicate to each other, no, we actually don't think that it is. Because we don't treat it as something important. We don't treat it as something necessary. And the third piece in being able to make that happen is you and your partner have to have a commitment to go back often and review your process. All right, how are we doing? Do we really share everything that we need to feel when we're feeling the range of emotions? Do we feel like we can talk to each other? Why or why not? When you guys go back and you review your process, I'll even use the word critique. When you critique your process, it gets better. It also renews the commitment every time. Every couple that I've worked with who have decided this is a good idea, when they started out, right after they decided a good idea, they were terrible with it. They weren't good at it. It took a lot of practice. So looking at both, yes, we're committed, looking at how are we doing giving and receiving, and looking at how's our process working, let's refine it. That's what gets you guys to be masters here, and that's what gets two people to be proficient at finishing that 200-foot climb without killing anybody. So that is why you should talk about everything.
Thank you, John. So couples who don't do this, that you just said you're going to be bad at it when you start. What is the best way to start, though? I mean, is there a process that you suggest? Are there certain daily check-ins? Is it every day? Is it every other day?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think are really good. One comes from a friend of mine, Carver Brown, and he has a 3-point plan for getting sober. He says you have to go to a meeting every day. Carver is religious in 12 steps, so he'll say you have to get on your knees and pray every day, God help me to stay sober. And then he says the third thing, which is the principle I love, is every day you have to tell someone the truth about what's going on with you. So as a framework for couples, that third piece, practice every day telling the truth about what's going on for you. Some days the truth is going to be, well, things are really crappy and I'm depressed or I'm sad or I'm struggling. Other days the truth might be, I'm excited out of my mind for this thing that's happening, or I'm so happy, or this was a great thing. Communicating effectively is not always bringing up problems. It's being able to play all the notes, run the gamut. So that kind of check-in, that kind of commitment, every day we'll tell each other the truth about what's going on for us. That can help. Structured check-ins like a Thanos check-in, that can help. I would also say if you're wanting to do this and you're not in couples therapy, get in good couples therapy and then make the commitment. We talk about difficult things here. Couples therapy is not just a place to get ideas and theory and structure, although some of that is important. It's a place to do the hard work. So if both of you commit to, we're going to bring the tough stuff to our couple sessions, and then we're going to be good students and we're going to work through and we're going to get help. Those are all ways you can get started in talking about in learning how to being able to talk about everything.
Cool. Thank you. Great topic. before we jump into the Q&A, for those of you who got here late, a bunch of people have logged in since we initially had this discussion. Jon is offering it's called Thriving Together. It's a workshop for couples who've done the initial work of healing from betrayal, and they're ready to really move forward into a healthy, vibrant relationship. It starts the 24th of this month. And you are vetting couples to make sure that they are ready for this stage. And you can sign up for this at whitepinerecovery.com, or you can email Jon. What's your email address again, if you want to give that out? Because this is being recorded. It will be on YouTube.
It's jtaylortherapy@gmail.com. And just look at J. Yep.
Cool. All right, let's jump into the Q&A. Is there a way to encourage my enmeshed sex addict husband to do recovery work without me asking him to do it? It's been 3 years since D-Day. He has gone to both Ken Adams workshops, which is great. But it sounds like he maybe not be doing all the recovery work. So how can this happen without the wife being,
the short answer is no. You can't encourage without asking, because that's what encouragement is. And there's a lot of different. I would encourage you to look at a lot of different types of encouragement. There can be encouragement on the side of like hitting someone over the head with a 2x4 metaphorically, and there can be encouragement on the side of like, hey, I've noticed you haven't been going to meetings. What's up with that? Would you be willing to get back into that? I've noticed it's been a while since you've met with your therapist. What's going on with that? Would you be willing to get back into that? I would say at the very least, if there's a direction you want your partner to go into, that second way of encouraging, at the very least, that needs to happen. Tell me what's going on here. I'd really like you to be engaged in this kind of work, and then give the reasons why. Because it makes me feel, because it gives me assurance. It shows me that you're working on things. So yeah, the short answer to that is you can't encourage someone without asking, without being outright with it. Once you get agreement, there's all sorts of ways that you can encourage without having to directly address it. If your spouse has a 12-step meeting that they like, or that they go to on Wednesday nights, you can make sure that there's no home responsibilities for them on Wednesday night, so that it's easy for them to go. You can offer praise and encouragement. Hey, thank you for hitting your meetings. Thank you for doing your book work. I'm really seeing a difference in how you're handling this or that, if that's true. But the initial conversation from an inert state, from a nothing's happening, that's a hard one to start. And I can see why you would be asking, is there a way to do this without doing it?
Is it sometimes helpful for betrayed partners to say, how can I bring this up without being an addict?
Sure.
And find out, just some, like a safe word for, like pineapple means I want to talk about your recovery or something.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. The last thing I want you to do is to feel like I'm on your back about this, and that I'm your mother about this.
Right.
With your enmeshed man. But you and I need to level with the reality that this is not something that can be neglected. So can we set up a way where we can talk about this in a way that's productive and not unduly triggering?
Yeah. And this is real common for betrayed partners. They don't want to be the recovery police, but at the same time, they want you to do your recovery, because they don't feel safe if you're not doing your recovery. So this is always a push-pull, I think, in a lot of relationships.
For sure.
And this is part of, hey, let's talk about everything.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little unsafe right now because you missed you haven't been to a meeting this week or whatever. Okay, my sex addict husband has been sober from acting outside the marriage for 15 months. Sober from porn for 6 months. I would suggest that using porn is acting outside the marriage in most of the time, but depends on your relationship agreement. And I'm editorializing. I don't need to do that. So sober from acting outside the marriage for 15 months, sober from porn for 6 months. He goes to men's groups 5 days per week and meets with a CSAT once a week. 2 months ago, he played the online game Grand Theft Auto, where you can go into a strip club, get a lap dance. He did both, admitted it only after I asked, and claimed the graphics from 10 years ago were not even good. He said he wasn't aware it was wrong, but now he does understand that. Could his awareness be that low? And then the follow-up here is, how can he be thinking of both of us if his awareness is so low, and how can he develop more awareness before the fact? So, yeah.
I mean, I won't pretend to know exactly what's going on there, but I mean, it sounds a little flimsy. Oh, I didn't realize that was wrong, and now I do. I don't buy it. So I think the more important part of this is not, it's not so much like, is the awareness low? It's the second part of the question, which I really like. If the awareness is low, how can you develop more awareness from the fact, from pressure? The right kind of pressure. So this is where, you know, I would talk about the difference between like an ultimatum and a boundary. The like, hey, if you don't see a problem with this, you have to get to a point where you do understand why this is a problem for me. And I can't just be the one who teaches you in every circumstance. Like, you need to work on why this doesn't register for you. I need you to do that, or I can't feel safe with you. I need you to do that, or it shows me that you're not taking our relationship seriously or your recovery seriously. All in all, like when I'm a couples therapist and stuff like this happens and I hear excuses, honestly, this is how I feel about it. I don't care why you did it. That's not the point. The point is that you did, and it did damage. And the fastest way to get this resolved long-term is not to go into a lengthy exploration of why did you do it or why didn't you do this. It's to hold the line with, here's what needs to happen. And if that doesn't come naturally for me, I have to feel the pressure that comes from that gap. And I have to respond in a positive way. I have to grow. I have to challenge myself. I have to figure it out.
Yeah. And just from the addict's perspective, you know, if you want to heal your relationship, you need to be rigorously honest. And that means you tell the truth and tell it faster. You don't wait to be asked. You say, I have to tell you something. I was playing this video game and stupidly I did this. Because, yeah, I'm not buying that he didn't know that was a bad idea either. And, you know, and you don't get defensive. You don't say, well, the graphics weren't even any good. Your wife doesn't care if the graphics are good or not. She doesn't care. You know? And
I would also submit, when you're in an acting out mode, you don't care if the graphics are good either.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of, you know, sometimes I'll say you need to use your wife's filter, not your own. You need to pretend your wife is over here and your kids are over here and they're watching everything you do. So how would they feel if they were watching you play Grand Theft Auto and you went into a strip club and got a lap dance? They wouldn't, your kids would be freaked out and your wife would be really angry, rightfully. So yeah, I mean, addicts can be frustrating because, you know, our denial, I am a sex addict recovery, and our denial is powerful. I mean, we can justify just about anything in the moment, even when we know this is a terrible idea. So at the very least, after we give in to one of those terrible ideas, we need to come clean, and come clean quickly. Don't wait to be asked. That is not rebuilding trust. That is furthering the betrayal. So, and again, this goes back to our topic. We need to talk about everything. Good relationships, we talk about everything. And if you want to have a good relationship, you've got to start telling the truth, particularly about this stuff. So, okay, that was a bit of a rant for me. Do you have anything to add, Jon?
No, just an amen, preach.
Hey. Okay, next question. I know no one can tell me an actual timeline, but in your opinion, how long does it take for denial to end? My addict claimed he was healed, but 3 discoveries that he does not see as issues. An emotional affair from years ago, but only now just discovered. And sexually, this is a follow-up, sexually explicit games in March. He denies he is an addict any longer because Jesus healed him. Thoughts?
So my first answer, denial never ends.
Right.
Denial is something that everybody uses to cope with an overwhelming reality. So in my book, it's not a matter of like stopping denial, it's a matter of becoming accountable, becoming curious, becoming honest. Um, all of our worst traits, our worst coping, um, most of them are only malignant, they're only dangerous if they go unchecked. If you take a step forward and it's a step into denial, that can actually be very, very low consequence as long as your next step is a corrective one. Yeah, I'm off there. I'm sorry, that doesn't hold water. I've got to do some work on that. I can tell that I'm not really seeing this in a realistic way. At the very least, let me run this by my sponsor. Let me run this by my support group just to make sure that I'm not distorting anything, because I know I'm capable of that. So I would say denial never ends. Accountability around denial should increase over time as a sign of good, solid recovery. What you're talking about here, I mean, again, it's troubling, it's concerning. Like Scott said earlier, as addicts, we have really powerful denial. And, you know, we can convince ourselves that something is true, even when on the face value, I mean, it doesn't hold any water. I've actually found as a therapist, my most effective tool around denial is just to ask a lot of follow-up questions. And you stay on top of the follow-up questions until either what you're getting actually makes sense, or until the person realizes, yeah, this doesn't make sense. So yeah, as far as like the being healed and I'm not an addict any longer, maybe that happens for some. I think it's often the exception, not the rule. And with anything that you claim, the proof is in the result. You know, Jesus is mentioned here, so I'll get Christian. By their fruits you shall know them. So you look, if you look at what supports an addictive lifestyle, it's lying, it's minimization, it's one-person system thinking, not two-person system thinking. You could look at any of those for an indicator whether or not addiction is actually healed. And I know a lot of people who, you know, by their words, all desire to act out was removed. That is not the same as being healed. As actually the principle of this couples workshop that I'm doing is healing and stopping the hurt is not the same thing as being restored. It's stopping destructive behavior does not automatically start constructive behavior. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 20 years sober from this addiction, and I'm still an addict. You know, often, even now, you know, it's first thought, wrong thought. You know, I still have to recognize that my brain is an addicted brain. I always want to escape before I want to actually deal with something in a healthy way. So I always sort of look with sort of a questioning eye when somebody says they're recovered or they're fully healed, or once you're an addict, you're always an addict. You just don't have to be an active addict. So yeah. When I share information from my therapist with my porn addict spouse, he claims I am triangulating. How do I share my therapy if I'm accused of triangulating every time I do this? He is seeking no recovery and is still blaming me for his behaviors.
So let's talk about what triangulating actually is in situations like this. So it's an easy trap as a therapist for me to fall into, to start diagnosing or giving advice or giving insight, especially when somebody's chief complaint in therapy is their relationship. It's really tempting to try to give insight and try to give diagnosis. However, it's completely unethical for me to form an opinion about someone I have not met, for me to form a clinical opinion, and furthermore, to strongly recommend with confidence treatment for somebody who I have not assessed. So if that happens in a therapy session, you're talking to your spouse, hey, my therapist says that you are struggling with blah, 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 blah. That is what triangulating is. I'm bringing a third into our relationship. I'm bringing that third in as an authority, and I'm leaving you out. That is triangulating. However, it can be really helpful, and it can be really productive to talk about your experience and your feelings and what you're learning in therapy about you. That is not triangulation at all. Even if what you're sharing, let's say you come home from a therapy session and you say to your spouse, hey, I'm learning that I roll over and I say yes really fast when I mean no. And I give into pressure easily. That in no way is an indictment on anybody else. That's I learned this about me. Your spouse might feel guilty about that because they might capitalize on that. They might actually really, this might sound twisted, they might appreciate that about you. And I always get what I want. And they might feel guilty when you recognize. So saying what you're learning and what you're experiencing, it may not be all, roses and daisies for your partner, but that's not the same as triangulating. Triangulating is, again, inviting the influence of a third party and inviting them in as a authority figure. An example of this with the couples I work with, I tell them that Jon said is a swear word in your home. You do not bring that up at home. You can talk about Jon said when you're here with me, when Jon can speak for himself. But and I'll teach about triangulating there with them too, is that's triangulating, and that's taking one-upsmanship with each other. And you are not to do that. You stand on your own merits when you're interacting with your partner. I hope that's helpful.
I do think it is. And let me just, the tag on sense here is he's seeking no recovery and still blaming me for his behavior. How common is this, and what can a betrayed partner in this situation do? I mean, what boundaries can be set,
Yeah. I think it's really common when somebody has things that they need to work on, and it's kind of clear, and they're not. I think it's really common to be sensitive and to want to shut down that process of discovery and getting names for things, because I mean that not knowing what things are, staying fuzzy, that's part of where denial thrives. That's part of where addiction thrives. So it's really, really common. There's a lot of different ways to handle that with a partner. And I've seen, anything that ranges from, super effective to like not effective at all. And you might as well just end the relationship now. Something that is effective in encouraging, or is more effective in encouraging a partner to get help they need, is to come prepared to have a relationship defining conversation. So in this case, here's what I make up about this case. I could be off in the facts. That doesn't matter so much. What I make up about this case is there's a pornography problem. And by that, I mean, you using porn is a problem for me. Not okay with it. It's not what I want as part of our relationship. I consider it a betrayal. I don't want you to do it. So what I've seen in the effective tack is, hey, I've noticed you've continued to use pornography. We've talked about that. I've let you know my feelings. I would like you to go to therapy, and I would like you to explore why you continue to use pornography after you know how I feel about it and how it affects our relationship. Because what it makes me wonder is if you really want this relationship or not. If you really care, if you really value my feelings or not. So I would like you to get into therapy. I'd like you to go for at least 3 months and explore this. And if you and I start to see improvement in our relationship as a result, and we'll see improvement because, we'll talk more openly, or I'll feel like you are understanding my feelings better. I'm going to get help and support too. And maybe I'm less reactive and, less explosive in my responses. Let's give it 3 months and let's come back and let's talk. Are we on the right path? Is this helping us? That's the effective approach I've seen. What I've seen as not so effective is coming to a partner and saying, you're a porn addict. My therapist says so. You're in denial. You need to get help. not only does that not work coming from an intimate partner, I've also noticed in the 12-step rooms, it doesn't help very often either to have the hardcore confrontation. The first model is more of what we'd call a supportive confrontation. I'm being very upfront with you. Here's the issues I see. Here's the change I would like to make. I'd like to see you work on. I'd like to work on too. And here's the time frame I'd like to see that in. If that can't happen, if it doesn't happen within that time frame, I will consider a different arrangement in our relationship. I go, you go, we end it, we separate, whatever that looks like.
Thank you. My spouse is asking me questions about rapes that occurred before we were married when I was 17 years old. He is implying that it wasn't rape and that I betrayed him because I didn't tell him for nearly 2 years after we were married, even though he waited 35 years to tell me of an assault that happened to him. How do I answer this, or do I? And I'm going to throw another question in there. Is it common for cheating partners to search for ways to blame the betrayed partner by saying, well, you did this, and acting like it's...
Yeah, absolutely. It's called displacement. It's a very well-known, very well-documented defense mechanism. The temptation with displacement is that it sets up this binary camp. You were wrong, no, I was right. If we go back to like secure functioning principles in a relationship, when there's been betrayal, there's two things that have to happen simultaneously. First of all, the person who has done the betraying, who has actively broken the covenant, the bond, the promise in the relationship, they have to take a one-down position. They have to recognize, I've wrecked this. If you didn't want to continue with me, you would be justified. This relationship is continuing because you have been gracious enough to allow it to continue and to give me another chance. That has to be the attitude in phase one. Without that, there is no indication that the person who has done the wrong and done the breaking has any kind of contrition or any kind of recognition that what they did is not the same. It's not on the same par as, like, you know, you lied to me once about how much you paid for groceries. Lying is lying, sure, but there are different magnitudes and there are different realms of impact there. So number one, that's what that makes me think of, is this, if there's been a betrayal, it sounds like the contrition is not there, and that's worrisome. The second thing is, and simultaneously with this, this phase one differential and power, both parties are responsible for secure functioning at all times. Now, to go back, not to what your relationship was, not to go back to the reasons why you didn't say anything, or the reasons why he didn't say anything. If you had to go back and give advice to your younger selves, would you say, yeah, don't talk to your partner about this ever. It's best if you don't. Or would you say, this is the kind of stuff that before we commit to marriage with each other, we need to know about each other? I would say, from a secure functioning standpoint, it is something that both parties are responsible for, both disclosing and asking and exploring. Most couples, and it's understandable, they are so hopped up on the love and infatuation hormones or the pressure from family or whatever it is, they don't stop and do their due diligence. So from a secure functioning standpoint, you both should have had this information before you went into marriage from each other. So from that standpoint, it's not a matter of, am I right and you're wrong? It's, we both messed up there. We both overlooked. Maybe we were immature. Maybe we didn't think it was a big deal. But we should have given that to each other. In this realm where there's some betrayal, and I'm trying to look in the question. I don't see in there that there's betrayal from your spouse. I'm assuming there is. Where there's betrayal, your admission to, yeah, I should have done that. That was wrong with me. I'm sorry. That is not saying you are out of the doghouse and now we're on a level playing field. That might be what your partner's looking for in this kind of like clawing, you should have told me. It's not. That's holding up the torch for secure functioning. That's saying, yes, we both need to be accountable to this standard. That is not our biggest issue right now. It is something that we do need to address. Right now, the biggest issue is we don't have honesty, we don't have transparency, we don't have mutual protection at the center of our relationship. And if you are the one who's betrayed, right now you are primarily responsible for that. Until you have shown that you are willing to do your due diligence and you're willing to fix what you've broken, you don't have a leg to stand on to point fingers at your spouse. As the betrayed spouse in this situation, I would encourage you to look at, is it a big deal for you to admit wrongdoing if there was wrongdoing? So you're right, I should have, that was wrong. Here's what we're focusing on now, at least within yourself. That's how I would say, how do I answer that? Yeah, if I could go back, I wish we would have done it different.
I'm going to take, we've got 2 questions left. I'm going to take them out of order because this one is a follow-up. I want to make sure we get to it. The triangulation question, the sex addict who's not in recovery. The question is, can't the therapist tell the partner that the addict is being abusive and is a sex addict? And can't the partner say, my therapist says this relationship won't work if you don't get into recovery?
They can, sure. Here's the problem I see with that.
Yeah,
It's not that, so if your therapist says that and they get that right without meeting your partner, they got lucky. So I always tell my individual clients, I cannot help you deal with your spouse unless your spouse is right here. I can help you deal with the spouse in your head. And it sounds like the spouse in your head, and what I mean by that is your perception, because that's all we have when we're in individual therapy. It sounds like you're in a relationship that's abusive. That's what you're perceiving. That's what you're experiencing. Now, if that's the case, it's actually not up to your partner to, hopefully, ideally, your partner would see the light and they would change. But if you're in an abusive relationship, you have a responsibility too. And that's, do I allow this to continue? Do I go on like everything's normal and I cross my fingers and hope that my partner's going to change? Or do I start looking at the reasons why I've accepted this, why I've continued on, and do I make the changes that I need to? And again, with like your partner's a sex addict, that is only something that comes from assessment and diagnosis. Right. I'm sorry, it's not. And I've talked to therapists before who have said, I've worked with this for decades and I can smell it from a million miles away. No, you can't. There are a lot of reasons why someone would act out compulsively. Sex addiction is one reason, and it takes careful assessment and diagnosis before you can say with certainty that's what's going on. It is not out of bounds for an individual therapist to say, I wonder if this is what you're dealing with. Have you considered asking your partner to get assessed? I've done that a lot, but that's different. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's what needs to happen. And again, this relationship won't work if you don't get into recovery. Again, as a therapist, and that you can tell I have a sensitive spot here. This is more about therapists than it is about their clients. Until you've seen the couple together, you have no clue what's going on. And
as you said earlier, you tell your clients, Jon says is a swear word. Yeah. And this is, Jon says this relationship won't work if you, who has not met, don't get into recovery.
Yeah.
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 And this is triangulation.
It is. And I will say, sometimes triangulation is not just something that my clients do, it's something that therapists can participate in too. So therapists have to be careful not to diagnose someone that they have not assessed, not to make claims about a relationship that they've not seen in action, because they can't. We're not fortune tellers.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of people come, even people who think they're sex addicts will come into therapy, and when they're assessed, they're not. They have some issues related to sex, but not necessarily an addiction. I mean, this is why proper assessment is so important. When people want to come to Seeking Integrity, we do some digging before we let them come see us, just to make sure they're coming to the right place. And if they're not, we'll say, we suggest going to see this person instead, because they will be able to help you more than we could, because we treat sex addiction, so yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay, last one here. How many hours a week should a sex addict with 3 years of sobriety be doing recovery work? He goes to a few meetings, couples therapy, and every other week his CSAT, but no podcasts or books.
Yeah,
love these questions.
I tend to look less at the hours requirement, and I look more like, are the symptoms being taken care of? Is the illness being treated? For some people at 3 years, it's like maintenance mode. And it's, I hit my meeting every week, and I talk to my sponsor a couple times a month, or I'm sponsoring. I go to therapists I go to my therapist weekly, every couple weeks. It all depends. If there's crisis continuing, I would look less at how much time should be spent, and I'd look at what are you doing in the time that you're spending, and does it actually address the needs that you have? Are you actually getting treatment for what's wrong? Because I had one guy who he would go to like 2 meetings a day early on, and what he would do in those meetings is he would posture. It was crap recovery work. He spent a lot of time doing it, but he wasn't getting real, and that's what we had to focus on. Now he goes to 2 meetings a week. He's honest with a sponsor. He doesn't show up inauthentically, and he cut the actual time that he spent on recovery stuff in a week. He cut it by like more than half, and he's far more effective because he's doing the things that actually address his problems.
Yeah, there's no set amount of time. There's no, I mean, I have a lot of guys will say, well, I couldn't possibly go to a meeting every day. I don't have time. And I say, you were looking at porn for 4 hours a day. Stop looking at porn and go to a meeting. But yeah, there's no set amount. For the last 10 years of my recovery, I need at least 3 meetings a week. If I don't get to 3 meetings a week, I get a little crazy.
Yeah.
That's me. But, that was also 10 years of sobriety where I realized, okay, I need at least 3 meetings a week. There's no set amount. I know people who go to 1 meeting a week. I know people who go to a meeting every day who have 40 years of sobriety, because that's what they need. And, no podcasts or books. Some people don't read. Some people don't. I don't listen to podcasts. I've been on it, countless podcasts, and I've never listened to any of them. I don't want to hear myself talk.
Yeah.
But different people learn differently. Some people are book learners. Some people are meeting learners. Some people are therapy learners. Some people are podcast webinar learners.
The thing that you can't kid yourself on, and that's why I like, instead of the time requirement, is, okay, what are the problems you're trying to solve, and are you solving them?
Yeah.
If you're saying I have anger issues, and you're saying, well, I'll take care of it myself, and like the expression of anger is not changing or the frequency is not changing, well, you got to do something different than take care of it yourself, because that's not working.
Yeah. One last quick one. Can I tell my therapist she is triangulating?
Sure, you can. And what I would say is, what you got to look for is the response. If you say, listen, it's getting off track and it's actually confusing for me when you tell me what's going on with my partner. I need to stay focused on me here and what's going on with me. Can you do that? If your therapist agrees and they can actually do it, great. If not, you might want to find someone who will focus less on your partner as your problem and more on helping you with how you're hurting.
Yeah, and this is kind of the basics of codependence is, you got to care for yourself, yes, first, and and in your case, you need to care for yourself in your relationship with your partner. And yeah, anyway, we're out of time. So great topic, Jon, as always. Thank you again. Remember, Jon has online work group coming up starting on the 24th. You can find out more about that at whitepinerecovery.com. And if you're newer couple in recovery, we have a work group for couples starting on September 22nd. So starting about the same time, both for couples. The one on seeking integrity is newer couples. Jon's is more advanced couples. Both are fabulous and highly recommended. So
thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being here. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll see you then.
See ya.